Um, Thanks for the time today. My name is Scott Davison, and I'm a solutions engineer with VMware. And today I'm going to be covering a bunch of VMware acquisitions, kind of talk a little bit about the company, what they were doing, and since we've acquired them, what that's turned into. So you kind of know what the VMware product name or what influence that's had on things. And so to get started here, I've pulled out pretty much a time frame of 2012 all the way into 2021. And as you can see on this screen, there's been a lot of acquisitions. Of course, VMware, we create our own software in-house, but sometimes it makes sense for us to go out and acquire companies as well. And so I'm going to dive a little bit into each one of these companies. So first, I'm going to kind of break things down to a chunk. So we'll look at kind of 2012 to 2017. And in July of 2012, VMware acquired a company called Nicira. And at the time, Nicira was basically trying to create a network in software only. That way, it didn't require hardware to run. Now, of course, it had to run on top of something, but it was this idea of taking what VMware done with virtualizing compute and virtualizing the network. Shortly after a little over a year later, in October 2013, that's where VMware released NSX. And so the acquisition of Nicira became what we call NSX today. And that's really what started, I think, VMware's shaping into the software-defined data center, right? Everybody's heard about SDDC, of course, at this point in their lives. But this idea that we could, define the data center and software with the compute, the storage, and the networking. And the acquisition of Nicira was key to that. And then we also re-engineered NSX in 2018, so it no longer really required just vSphere to run on top of. Today, you can run NSX in public clouds. You can also deploy an agent and run it on bare metal systems too. In October of 2013, we acquired a company called Destone. And Destone was this company that had basically created a solution that service providers could run to provide VDI. And so they were already using a majority of VMware products like vSphere and Horizon and vCloud to provide this multi-tenancy desktop as a service solution. What was unique to Destone as well is that they had the ability to take a customer's network and extend that into this service cloud out there. And so we acquired them back then, and today this is really more on the service provider side of things, but we call this Horizon DAS platform. I think it was a key acquisition that's led to some of the public cloud offerings now that we can do, where we run Horizon and AWS, Azure, Google, and such. At the beginning of January 2014, we acquired a company called Wondering Wi-Fi. Probably more known as AirWatch if you've been around for a while, and we've since rebranded that Workspace One UEM. What Wondering Wi-Fi was doing is they're basically providing just mobile device management for really at the time rugged devices. And when iOS 4 came out, Apple allowed the ability to kind of plug into that and do MDM on top of that, and that really opened up choices for enterprises. Previously from a mobile device, you'd run maybe BlackBerry, and so you kind of had to run that for email and some things. With that iOS 4 release, Wondering Wi-Fi shift to be able to manage iOS devices. And since then, now that's expanded, and with what we can do in Workspace One UEM, of course, not just mobile devices, right, but even desktops, whether that's Windows or Mac OS, Chrome, and then of course still the rugged and even Internet of Things devices that Workspace One UEM can manage. So a good example of what I mean by manage, right? The ability to push down configuration changes to require a user to have maybe a passcode before they unlock the phone. That's crucial for enterprises, right? When you have somebody bring in maybe their own personal phone or even a company device, you want to be able to control that. So if a person leaves or it gets lost, you can do things there. And then Workspace One UEM today can even further that and push down applications. And so we can, allow you to download maybe through an enterprise catalog applications on a mobile device, or even push software down to desktop OSs. And then in April 2017, we acquired a company called Wavefront. At the time, that was that I could find that the first SaaS company VMware went out and acquired. So Wavefront, and still to today, runs in the cloud. We've rebranded it since then under the Tanzu portfolio. It's called Observability. And what Wavefront does is it basically takes monitoring, but really metrics collection to a whole nother level, right? So we have tools out there that can tell us sometimes, you know, like CPU memory and those kind of things. You can even dive a little bit into the application. But when you start thinking about modern apps and microservices and all the various containers and everything that makes up, you know, even something like an Amazon web page, I think I've seen things that it's like over 200 microservices that are out there. Wavefront can look at all those data points, even down to like the hardware level, pull stuff out of like an iDRAC, for example, and give you correlation across the environment. So the intent would be if you patch code, maybe there's some downstream effect, Wavefront can give you that visibility. I think another good example to try to explain that is like, if you think about a smartwatch, right? And maybe it can do your pulse and it can even do some things like, you know, trying to figure out your sleep patterns. But then we look at like professional sports teams today now where they've got players, you know, wired up with analytics machines. We know, you know, the heart rate, how many calories they're burning when they do exercises. That's like Wavefront, right? It's observability on steroids to help you, you know, with your modern applications. And then in May 2017, we acquired AppTelligent. Today, that's still called AppTelligent and actually plugs into our Workspace One portfolio of stuff. And it was previously a company called Critterism, and they changed it. And what AppTelligent can do for you is if you're writing like native apps, it has the ability through this SDK to kind of pull data out. And so when you create an app, it's important to know what screens users are going into. When they launch into a different screen, how long does that take to load? If it crashes, what was going on at the time? Maybe I want to pull across my deployment stack and see what versions are out there running, like how many people are on the older version versus how many have upgraded. That's what AppTelligent does. It's really more, like I said, it's solely for mobile apps and really for companies who are writing apps internally and want to do, you know, additional analytics to kind of understand what's going on. And then and there's a few acquisitions today that'll kind of call back to some of the previous presenters. But in late December of 2017, we completed the acquisition of VeloCloud. At the time, it was a 20% market share in the SD-WAN space. And now today, we've rebranded that VMware SD-WAN. We are now the market leader. I like to point this one out as I think building upon the success of NSX, right? VeloCloud is a great way to connect endpoints, more that WAN connectivity. It uses the dynamic multipath optimization that I think was just alluded to earlier. And that's very helpful in the fact that it's actually per packet, which is what also sets VMware SD-WAN kind of apart from some of the other players in the space. So if I'm got more than one connection across my my WAN to go out, right? We can look at things per packet and make a smart routing choice to send it over one link or the other. We talked about how it can reduce jitter earlier, and you know that's what you get with this DMPO. It's now, of course, as we just saw, part of a key piece of the SASE platform. So when we look at the VeloCloud acquisition, right? Enabled us to get into SD-WAN space. It's actually, I think something to point out too, is it's the only physical piece of hardware that you can buy from VMware, right? And you know, you can ship this device out there and it's easy to configure, but at the end of the day, it's still running in software, and we can even run this in cloud and a virtual appliance. So as we look back kind of 2012, 2017, you know, I think we started off with this furthering our vision around software-defined data center, made some acquisitions to kind of bolster what we were doing at the time with just Horizon and moving bigger into the EUC space. Of course, now we can manage pretty much, you know, any device. And then dabbled a little bit around modern apps and with the acquisition of Wavefront, and then finished up things with the VeloCloud. So next, I'll talk about kind of a time frame of 2018 to 2019. And I joined VMware in 2018, and it seemed like ever since I've joined, we've been out acquiring companies left and right. And so that's why I've got kind of a small window here to talk through a bunch of acquisitions. We started off with an acquisition of Cloud Choreo in February of 2018. And I think if you were on earlier, you saw this referred to now as VMware Secure State. And what Cloud Choreo was trying to do is as companies were moving into more public cloud deployments, they saw an opportunity to give more of a proactive approach to these deployments and allow you to set up, policies and procedures. And so if somebody's going to go out and deploy something in the public cloud, especially back then, the chances were that they probably weren't going through the normal processes, right? That's why cloud at the time was fast, because nobody went through maybe all the security checks and controls. And so VMware Secure State can take a look at that. Like if somebody goes out and deploys an EC2 instance and they're going to put 3 network connections on it, right, and span 3 different network, VLANs, maybe that's not something we want them to do, right? So we can proactively stop them or at least alert on that and make somebody aware of that configuration. It can also go through and then, of course, continually scan the environment. So once something's deployed, it doesn't mean that it can't protect it. It can still enforce policy there. It can even remediate through automated scripts using APIs any misconfiguration. So once again, somebody goes out and dumps a network connection on the database server onto public VLAN. That's not a good thing, right? We don't want our database sitting on the internet. VMware Secure State can help you prevent stuff like that from occurring. And then it can look across multiple clouds. And so while you might have a good idea of what's going on in one cloud, you can get good visibility across everything. You can even baseline that and look for abnormal configurations across your full deployments. We follow that up later in the year with an acquisition of Cloud Health. Today we still call that solution Cloud Health. And it's another SaaS offering that's designed around really more public cloud use case. At the time, VMware started doing a lot more SaaS-based solutions themselves, and quickly realized that we know we're getting this giant bill in from these cloud providers, but what are we truly getting for that, right? And so we looked around for a solution that could give us better visibility in there. How could we identify what applications were costing what dollars? And that's where we found Cloud Health and really liked the solution so much that we turned around and bought the company. I'll give you an example of how Cloud Health helped the customer that I had worked with. They had deployed an application solely to the cloud, and they knew that this application was bringing in, and these are just fake numbers, but $10 million in revenue a year, right? But what they didn't know at the time was how much was that costing them in their overall cloud spend. And they had this giant cloud spend. So they wanted to have a better idea of what this app would cost them. So we POC'd Cloud Health, and it came back, and they were able to see that. And once again, these are fake numbers, but it cost them $5 million to run the cloud, right? So they pulled in 10 million in revenue. They spent 5 million to get that. They had a net profit of $5 million. Using that kind of information, they could also then extrapolate, if I onboarded more users on, I would add more servers, how much would that cost me? Also in that POC, we used Cloud Health to show them that there was some optimization that they could do in the cloud. And so if you think about cloud being in some cases on demand, or we can go to reserved instances, Cloud Health can also give you those recommendations as well. It might find a machine that is maybe over provisioned for what it's doing performance-wise, and it can be shrunk down. If you can do that, then of course you can save some dollars there. Or maybe we've got something running on demand for a year and a half. Cloud Health's going to come back and suggest a recommendation around moving that to a reserved instance. And like all the majority of the cloud stuff that we have today, this can help you with pretty much majority of the public cloud providers that are out there. So it also gives you visibility across all your environment of what you've got deployed. And then in late November of 2018, we acquired a company called Heptio. And I like to refer to this one as really more of an acquisition of brain power, right? Or brain trust, smart people. Heptio was founded in 2016 by Joe Beta and Craig McLuckie, who are kind of leading the Kubernetes ecosystem out there. And we acquired this company. Today, you could kind of say it's led to, I think, a lot of innovations around what we call our Tanzu platform or the various Tanzu solutions that we have out there. No specific product, right, that it was turned into. But those employees as part of Heptio, right, that's really helped shape our modern application vision today at VMware. VMware is now #2 contributor all time to Kubernetes out there. And we kind of have an expertise, I think, that we use now to help customers from a consulting perspective of how to kind of move into the modern application transformation. We acquired a company called EtherPal, and today we refer to that as Workspace One Assist. That gives us the ability through Workspace One to remotely view and control endpoints. I had a customer that I worked with that their majority of their cash registers ran on top of Windows CE, and users at these stores, right, they were told that when they had issues, just reboot the thing, right? Maybe that solved 90% of the problems, but how do you then help that person when they call up and this thing still doesn't work? And so they use Workspace One Assist to remotely get into that device, and they can even control the screen. They can fix the problem remotely and get that machine back up and running for the people at that store. And so that's what we do today with Workspace One Assist. And then in May 2019, we acquired a company called Bitnami. Bitnami was out there basically creating prepackaged open source software to run, and it was the full piece, right? So they would package up the OS, maybe various OSs and software that required to run that. I might pull down, for example, some open source database as a developer, and I want to run that. Well, I need the OS for it to run on. I need the database to be installed. I need to be set up, and I need to be configured. And Bitnami Community Catalog, which is still out there today and free, is where all that started. And so developers love that because they could just go pull down something. They didn't have to go to the infrastructure team or the server team and request stuff. They didn't have to then turn around and deploy this thing. And then enterprises liked it because it was giving them everything prepackaged, and it was set to run under best practices. We've since rebranded this as Tanzu Application Catalog, which is a solution you can buy. And what's different versus what the Bitnami Community Catalog does out there is this allows you to internally run kind of your own enterprise catalog of stuff. So you can set your golden images for these developers to pull down, maybe your own applications configured in your own, best practices for your company. They can go out, pull that stuff down, and they can turn around and start, writing their code and stuff to go against it. So that would be Tanzu Application Catalog today, is what that's referred to. In July of 2019, we acquired Avi Networks, and Avi Networks was a company that their whole point was to go out there and create load balancers, but done in software. So if you think about, traditionally load balancers, we go out and buy a giant piece of hardware every so many years, we refresh it. Avi tackled that and said, hey, if people are deploying the cloud, that doesn't even work, right? How do they put that out there? And so while the various cloud providers have their own load balancers, Avi Networks can run on pretty much anything. And so you can deploy that out in all the public clouds as one way, right? One type of load balancer. I don't have to learn multiple load balancers. It can run on-prem, and then it's fully addressable through APIs. And in essence, what that allows you to do is easily automate this into any kind of CI/CD pipeline. So while traditional apps need load balancers, modern apps need it even more. As we think about deploying multiple containers, we want to have the ability to spin those things down with new updates and deploy new ones if needed. And Avi kind of can fit into that whole pipeline of things, which is great. It's easy to scale up and scale down. In fact, you can even configure it to look at load, and then it'll deploy another controller if needed, another service engine, if needed to scale that out. Avi can scale out. It can scale up, meaning you could run multiple, applications through a single or multiple Avi service engines, or I can scale it out, meaning I could deploy a load balancer for every application that I have if I want. And then if that load from a seasonal workload, let's say, spins up, great, it builds it out. And when it comes back down, it can even shrink it down as well. There's a lot of things that Avi can do, and today we refer to it as NSX Advanced Load Balancer. That's kind of a new rebrand as of recent. And then it also has a lot of really cool, like, real-time logging and just information stuff that you can see through the GUI, or you can pull through API. I think what sets that apart from maybe some of the other players in that space as well is that you're not having to go out there and get, PCAPs and network dumps and try to parse through stuff. You can kind of get that stuff real-time, even go back in time so many days back and try to troubleshoot issues. And then VMware acquired a company called BitFusion IO. Today, we just refer to that as BitFusion. And BitFusion was out there basically abstracting the GPU, similar to how vSphere extracts compute. It uses, of course, this is helpful for people who are now running AI and machine learning workloads across the GPU. What BitFusion solves for you is that in a traditional, like, AI ML workload, you're going to map directly to a video card or maybe slices of a video card, and you'll run your analytics across that. And then when it's done, it still is mapped to that GPU. BitFusion takes that, and what we do is we deploy a server out there on that VM guest, or on that vSphere host. We map that to the GPU, and then using clients, you talk to that BitFusion server. And that allows you now to, go out and consume GPU as needed. And when you're done, it's able to be out there. So think of it as kind of like over provisioning, but through software. And so that's what BitFusion is for us today. And we're also, of course, starting to do some stuff with our partnership with NVIDIA around that. So probably more to come around AI and ML from us in the near term. And then in October of 2019, we completed the acquisition of Carbon Black. I remember this was, I think, announced at VMworld that year. And that was, I think, VMware, had been doing security things, right? Obviously, microseg with NSX, encryption around vSAN, some things as well in the EUC space. But this really allowed VMware to move directly into the security space. And, what do we call that today? In essence, Carbon Black, but there's really a lot of things that Carbon Black does. There's even a managed services aspect to it for threat protection. We can do, next gen AV on endpoints, so like desktops and such, VDIs. We can do next gen AV in server OSs, and then we've even now with workload protection, which I think was once again, if you were on earlier today, mentioned we can do stuff around protecting those VM guests through vCenter, giving a console for security team, but also console that the server team that has some managed states can run. A lot of things around Carbon Black that just you're going to see coming up that have even spun into more stuff in the security space. But this was a pretty key acquisition for VMware's idea of helping simplify things. And like we talked earlier, making security more built in versus bolted on. We also announced at that VMworld the acquisition of Pivotal, and then in December of 2019 that closed. Pivotal was a company that was actually co-created by EMC and VMware and spun out. And out of that was basically a solution. Pivotal Cloud Foundry is what a lot of people probably know it, PCF, to give a platform as a service to companies who are starting to create these modern applications. And when you're creating modern applications, you want to focus on that, right? You don't want to focus on how am I going to stitch all this open source stuff, all these new, modern microservices applications together, what works with what, how do I expand that out, how do I run it? The PAS idea, or PCF at the time, was this idea of a prescriptive approach that was pre-configured to just run. That way you could just use it to start creating these applications. Today, a lot of things have come out of that Pivotal acquisition. I've listed them all here, but as you can see, they're all kind of under the Tanzu naming piece there. There's even something we have called Tanzu Labs, which Pivotal was, I think, really successful, and we still are today with helping customers not only like modernize existing apps, but coming on site, pre-COVID or remotely today, and helping you also build new apps, right? Sitting with our customers in a room and designing these things from the ground up. And then, of course, making suggestions as well as around how to create these PaaS environments and how to run things on them. So when we look at just that really 2-year span, like I said, a lot of acquisitions, stuff all over the place. Obviously, a big focus early on in public cloud and how we could help out in that space, which I think keeps VMware today relevant. Even if you're cloud native, that's great. We still have solutions that can help you, whether it's secure state, cloud health, or even NSX advanced load balancer, right? These are technologies that don't require vSphere. A little bit of bolstering around what we're doing in the end user space, making that product more enterprise grade with the Workspace One Assist, and then obviously quite a bit of innovation and through internally, but also through acquisitions to help out in kind of the modern app space, which today it really is turned into kind of what Tanzu is. All right, so then as we look at kind of 2020 to current, or to today, and hopefully we haven't bought a company since I've been talking, so I don't have in here yet, but we started off in January of 2020 with an acquisition of a company called Niansa. Today we refer to that as Edge Network Intelligence, and I think as you just saw, that was alluded to as being part of the SASE solution today. But Nienza is basically an AI based analytics that can plug into your LAN and your WAN endpoints and devices in your network. But it can also ingest data from third-party applications through APIs. And so an example of where edge network intelligence is helpful is if you've got a lot of people on a Zoom call, right, and one person's having user performance, Nienza can kind of help through that third-party integration to Zoom, pulling all the metrics in to kind of get a full picture of what's going on for that end user. And it might be that, for example, maybe they're on a Wi-Fi AP that's super overloaded, right? So Nienza can give you and can tell you those kind of things and as far as what's going on there. It can also make suggestions around how to maybe improve your network. And so as Nienza pulls in all this data from the various networks, like I said, maybe APs, routers, switches on a floor, what's going on that client Wi-Fi, it might come back and suggest that maybe you make some changes to your network. Of course, this is all suggestive, but it does all that via AI and machine learning. And then in May of 2020, we acquired a company called Octarine. Today, we would call that Carbon Black Cloud Container. And in short, it's kind of like next-gen AV for containers, right? So it's great that I can now protect, my OS and I can protect my server, but now I've got tons of containers out there, right? How do I protect those things, right? What if they get compromised? And so that's what we do with Carbon Black Cloud Container. Just like you could with other next-gen AVs, you of course can create desired state configurations and policies around what it can do. And we've kind of folded this into the Carbon Black suite of things. And then this works with any upstream's Kubernetes. And so once again, you don't have to be a full VMware customer, right? This can help you with anything you're doing in that Kubernetes space, whether that's in the public cloud natively or running on top of VMware technology. And then we acquired a company called Lastline, which today we refer to as NSX Detection and Response. And just like Octarine was furthering the security for containers, Lastline is furthering the security for really everything on the network. And so it's basically there to kind of look at what's going on in your network traffic, and through AI, figure out maybe the abnormalities, right? The focus on kind of what's good behavior and alert and protect on maybe abnormal behavior. So example of that would be, I've got, and I love talking about database servers because they're, I think, our biggest, risk out there, right? It's our data. I've got a database server that all of a sudden, a lot of times it's getting data coming in, right? But it's not sending data out. NSX Detection Response all of a sudden notices that my database server is sending a lot of traffic out over port 53, right? What's that even about, right? And so maybe I've got to obviously do some analytics around that to further up and see what's there, but it's detecting maybe a potential breach of your environment. So I think of Lastline, or now NSX Detection Response, is almost kind of like AV for the network, right? Being able to kind of look for malicious things, whether it's malware or whatnot that might be causing me problems, connections that I don't normally see, and alerting me on that. If you think about security, right, we need multiple levels. We don't just need firewalls at the perimeter and antivirus on our machines. What if we could also have something that could help us from what's going on to help watch in the network? And that's what we do today with NSX Detection and Response. And then in July of 2020, we acquired not the company Blue Medora, but a piece of what they were doing, something that was called True Visibility Suite. We not only acquired the software, but the people who supported that. And if you don't know Blue Medora, right, they go out and they create all these management packs and things to integrate with other solutions. One of those being vRealize Operations Manager. And so the True Visibility Suite, or vRealize True Visibility Suite today, is a bunch of management packs that plug into VROps and give you additional metrics and visibility into other things in the environment. So, for example, VROps is really good at telling you what's going on in the virtualization environment. And so let's say I've got maybe a data store that's hitting some latency. Well, I know I've got a data store with latency. That's great, but I don't know if that's occurring, something in the on the fiber channel switch, or maybe even something on the array. So using True Visibility Suite, we can have management packs that go out and plug in to that fiber channel switch and management packs that go out and plug into that array, and they can bring all that into VROps and they can tell me what's going on. So maybe the issue is I had a storage controller fail and I'm running, 90% now on just side B. That's what we do with True Visibility Suite today. We can go out there and pull in, we have management pack that can bring in UCS and pretty much all the hardware vendors out there, and then even also to the database level. So I know I've got CPU usage on my database, but I don't know what's going on. Using True Visibility Suite, now I've got a management pack for my SQL database, and I know, oh, lo and behold, it's this one stored procedure that's out there just killing the CPU. Maybe there's some rogue deal or whatnot. I can go to that database team and say, hey, you need to take a look at this storage procedure. It's doing something out there. So the goal behind that, right, is just to give true end-to-end visibility in the data center. That way we're not just looking at, little pieces and then having to go to other teams and try to figure out what's going on. And then July of 2020, we acquired Datrium, which today we call that VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. And Datrium was trying to have, they're trying to solve kind of, I think, an age-old issue with disaster recovery sites, right? Depending on however your company does it, in all likelihood, you've probably got some hardware sitting there that, in essence, we hope it never gets used, right? Nobody wants to ever have a DR event. But I've got to have that capacity to run at this other location. So Datrium said, how could we use what the public cloud can do, right? This idea of on-demand or scale up as needed. How could we take advantage of kind of cheap storage that's out there in the cloud and provide some kind of solution that's maybe an alternative on how to do DR? And that's what they were doing, and we've acquired them. And so what we kind of do there, right, is we take point-in-time snapshots of your VMs and replicate that up to VMC on AWS, for example, and we stage that data out there on some cheap storage. In the event of a DR, you declare a DR in the VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. It orchestrates bringing up your machines. It orchestrates spinning up capacity in that cloud, and then we can even live mount to those snapshots that are up there, and then start working on moving that over to more performance storage in the cloud itself. And so it's a great way to kind of have a light version of DR and only execute it as needed. So it's really good for DR exercises that maybe you run once or twice a year. You spin that up, you run it on demand, for a day or two, and then you spin it right back down. If you have a DR event, hopefully it never happens to anyone. You spin that up there, right? You run it until you get everything fixed, and then you can bring all that stuff back down to your own data center. So it's a really good solution for, DR that's maybe I would say more affordable than to the traditional model. And then in October of last year, we acquired SaltStack. And that company was out there taking this open source software called Salt out there, right, which is really around config management. And then they kind of created some packs and some configuration around that. We went out and acquired them, and we now call that vRealize Automation SaltStack Config. And what this does is it brings full configuration to what we can do with VRA. VRA is really good at deploying stuff, right? We can do some post-install tasks, but what we have a hard time doing is addressing kind of what we can do today with Puppet Chef, right? Config management. And so a year and a half from now, I want to change DNS servers. How do I do that, right? We can use SaltStack config to go ahead and do that. So it really gives us more around what we can do with true automation with VRA itself, and not have to rely on kind of some of the third-party providers out there. So it's a good alternative maybe to what you're doing today, or maybe what you have today works great, and that's fine too. But this was, I think, a key piece for us to kind of further upon what we can do for deployments. And then we also have an offering called SaltStack SecOps that can do some additional things around vulnerability and compliance management. So, running stuff as far as CV scores across maybe your servers and your environment that are out there running, provide some recommendations, and then you can make some potentially configuration changes if needed. And then in March 2021, we acquired Mesh7. Today, that's, I'll say, to be determined, right? Still pretty new on that one. I haven't seen what the name of that will be changed, if it will be changed at all. But But Mesh7 was basically created out of this need to help provide some observability into what's going on in this API space now. So as we start doing more and more modern apps, everybody's moving more to APIs, API calls, right? I want to call out to this API and get some stuff. I want to call out to this and do that. Mesh7 can help you, first of all, kind of map out what's going on, what APIs are going on, what kind of information is being pulled there. But it can also help secure that as well. In fact, it can actually put a firewall on that API gateway, which is really unique here. And so while we can do firewalls, port to port or IP to IP, now we have this ability to do firewalls API to API, which is really cool too. If you think about multiple kinds of APIs, maybe I only want certain ones to be accessed from these endpoints, right? I don't block all APIs, I just want to block certain ones. So that's what Mesh7 does, and it'll be interesting to see what we do, what we name that, and also what we do with that piece. But it's really, I think, key to helping companies who are doing more and more with modern apps today. How can we kind of get better visibility into that environment and know what's going on? So as we look back at 2020, right, started off with furthering what we can do kind of in just the WAN and LAN space. A lot of AI kind of there with edge network intelligence. Of course, that has also been folded into now the SASE offering that we're talking about. Additional security stuff with Carbon Black Cloud Container, NSX detection response. So kind of two things that were security focused. Additional observability, across your full environment, right, with that acquisition of the Blue Medora True Visibility Suite. And then just dabbling, I'd say furthering on what we can do with DR today and providing maybe better options for our customers, especially customers who want to go to the cloud, but find that that's expensive to stage that up there. And then bolstering out what we're doing in our VRA story, right? We've done a lot of internal stuff in VRA around making it easy to deploy to clouds or really multi-clouds, any kind of technology. And now having the ability to do config management across your environment. And then this last acquisition here with Mesh7 of moving more closer even into the API space of modern apps. So that is a quick and dirty on all these companies. Of course, like I said, we do a lot of things internally, but we acquire a lot of companies too. I think that's what's unique about my role here at VMware is we've got so many solutions that we can help customers, with all these different offerings here. And so this is kind of just a kind of in snapshot here. And Ben, that's what I had for a presentation today. I don't know if there's a need to maybe answer any few questions or not, or if there's anybody who has a question I could address.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions? Feel free to come off mute.